Hi, I'm Linda Matthews, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make an embellished junk journal. I've designed this junk journal for everyday use, as a way to collect and store mementos, photos, inspiring quotes, or anything that I might want to remember in years to come. It's a way to capture the small, everyday moments that make up our lives and record them in a book that then becomes something meaningful and beautiful. This particular junk journal has a hardcover made from a book, which is a great way to recycle old or unwanted books and give them a new lease on life. The pages are made from papers and cardstock, such as scrapbook papers, magazine pages, and even printable papers. And the signatures are then sewn in using a pamphlet stitch. So the journal is quite easy to make using supplies that you probably already have in your stash. You can find a list of supplies in the description below. To get started, select a book with a hard cover. The book doesn't necessarily have to be vintage or old, it just has to have a hard cover where the pages are not glued to the spine. This book was published fairly recently, and the cover is still in good condition, so it's perfect to recycle and use as a journal cover. Other types of hard covers could be used, such as the cover on this journal or this old planner. The most important thing about selecting a book is to make sure that the pages are not glued to the spine so that they're easy to remove. To remove the pages, open the book and find the crease where the pages meet the cover. Using a small sharp craft knife, carefully cut along the edge of the pages where they attach to the cover. Cut slowly and be careful not to cut through the cover. Once the first side is cut, flip the book over and do the same on the other side. Once you've cut away the pages, you can discard them or keep them to use as pages in other junk journals or art journals. If there are any rough edges on the book cover, carefully snip them away with a small pair of scissors. At this point, you can leave the inside of the book cover and use it as it is, or you can cover the inside and the outside using fabric or paper. I'm going to cover the outside and the inside, so first I need to reinforce the inside section of the spine. This can be easily done using duct tape. Simply measure the length of the book cover, cut a piece of tape to length and press it over the spine area. Be sure to press into the edges of the spine so that the book will open and close easily. I'm going to cover the inside with fabric because it's more flexible than paper. Measure the inside of the book cover and cut a piece of fabric to size. Make sure to take into account the recess of the spine. The inside of this book is 7.5 inches high by about 12.25 inches wide. I've cut a piece of fabric the same height but a little longer in width so I can trim it back to size once it's been positioned. I'm going to glue the fabric in place using a spray glue because it's quick and easy to use and I can reposition the fabric fairly easily. After you apply the glue, press one side in place and then press the fabric into the spine recess. Once the fabric is positioned correctly, I can see that it needs to be trimmed on the right side by about 1/4 inch. For this process, using spray glue is less messy than using liquid glue, and you can easily peel the fabric back to cut it and then reposition it and let it dry. There is no right or wrong way to use a junk journal, so you can include papers and pages that work best for you. If you like to write or journal your thoughts, you may want to include different types of lined writing paper. If you draw or sketch, you may want to include some type of plain paper or watercolour paper. You could include papers that have interesting background patterns and colours, such as scrapbook paper, printable papers, and hand-painted papers. You could also use pages from magazines and books. If you remove the pages from a hardcover book, this is the perfect way to recycle them. And rather than let your favourite magazines sit and gather dust, put them to work in your journals. Some magazines have beautiful pages just begging to be used. The pages don't have to be the same size, so this is the perfect type of journal for using up all your different sized paper scraps. For papers that are slightly larger than the journal, I like to fold the edges over instead of cutting them off. This provides a fold-out page with more room or a place to tuck private or personal papers. Some scrapbook papers have designs printed on both sides, and all you need to do is cut them to size, so this is a quick and easy solution for making decorative pages. And some scrapbook papers have designs printed on only one side. For papers with designs printed on one side, you can leave the plain side blank and use it for writing or sketching, or you can colour it using a light wash of watercolour paint, inks and stamps, or colour markers and pencils. You could also glue two pages together so you have decorative papers on both sides. To do this, use a liquid craft glue or spray glue, which is quick and easy. Once you've decided on the types of papers you're going to include in your journal, cut or fold them to size and assemble them into signatures. The pages should be about the same size as the journal cover or slightly smaller so they fit neatly inside. The number of signatures and the number of pages in your signatures will vary depending on the size of your journal. For a journal that you'll enjoy picking up and using every day, it's important to use papers in colours and patterns that you love and that will inspire you. For my journal, I've made 3 signatures, each with about 9 or 10 folded pages of different sizes, using vintage and antique style colours and patterns. In this journal, I've included printable papers, scrapbook papers, and other types of papers that I found in my stash. Once the signatures are assembled, now it's time to sew them into the cover. To make it easy to sew the signatures to the cover, it's a good idea to make hole templates and punch holes into the cover and the signatures before sewing. To make a hole template for your cover, first measure the width and height of the spine. This book cover is 7.5 inches long by 1 inch wide. Then cut a piece of paper the same size. Then you need to decide how many holes you're going to use to sew the signatures in place. I'm going to include 3 signatures in my journal, and I'm going to sew them in using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So I need to mark the template with 3 holes down the centre and then another 2 sets, one on either side. 1 hole needs to be in the middle and the other 2 holes about 1 inch in from each end. If you are making a journal with a wider spine, you may want to use 4 or 5 signatures, and if your journal was longer, you may want to use a 5-hole or even a 7-hole pamphlet stitch. When marking the holes, make sure that they are spaced evenly apart, both widthways and lengthways. For the page hole template, cut a piece of paper the same length by about 2 inches wide. Fold the paper in half and make a crease down the centre. Align the folded edge with the markings on the cover template and transfer the markings from the cover template to the page template. To finish the templates, punch a hole through each of the marks using an awl. This will make it easy to transfer the markings. To transfer the hole marks, on the inside of the cover, position the cover hole template along the length of the spine and mark the hole positions using a fine point Sharpie. Once the markings have been transferred, poke holes through the spine using a bookbinding awl. After the holes have been punched through the cover, do the same with each of the signatures. Using the signature hole template, transfer the hole positions, then punch holes through all the pages. Use binder clips to hold the pages together while you punch the holes. After I transferred the hole marks using a black Sharpie, I couldn't see them because the page was too dark, so I used a white gel pen so the marks showed up better. To sew the signatures into the cover, cut a length of bookbinding or embroidery thread a little longer than twice the length of the page and thread it through a large embroidery needle. Position one of the signatures inside the book cover and, starting with the middle hole on the inside, push the needle through the signature and the cover to the outside, leaving about a 4-inch thread tail. Bring the needle back to the inside through the top hole, then back out again through the centre. Then back in again through the bottom hole. Pull the thread tight, then tie off in a knot in the centre. Sew the other signatures into the cover in exactly the same way. To finish off the journal, I cut to size and glued 2 pieces of scrapbook paper to the front and back of the book cover, and I also glued a piece of lace down the spine to hide the stitching. Now that the journal is assembled, it's time to embellish it. The secret to a really good junk journal is to not be stingy with your embellishments. Your journal should be overflowing with all sorts of fabric and lace, pockets and tags, beads and charms, and anything else you want to include. Although junk journals are primarily designed using pages made from paper or cardstock, it's very easy to include fabric and stitch elements as a way to embellish the pages. Ribbon and lace can be attached along the edges of pages easily by gluing them in place using a glue stick. If you wanted to stitch the lace to the page using a sewing machine, once the glue is dry, fold the pages under and you should be able to sew it easily. I've sewn this piece using a narrow zigzag stitch in white thread, so the stitching is not very noticeable. You can tie off the thread in a knot and then cut, leaving a couple of inches of thread tails, which adds texture and interest to your finished journal. If it's too difficult to add stitching directly onto the page, you can use my favourite technique for attaching fabric and lace collages. Simply layer the pieces of fabric and lace, together with any other embellishments, onto a backing of tearaway stabilizer. The stabilizer acts as a support when machine or hand stitching, and once everything is assembled and sewn, simply tear or cut away the excess stabilizer and glue the section onto the page. Use a glue stick to glue the pieces in position so they don't move around while you sew. Doing it this way is quick and easy, and you can position lace and fabric sections wherever you like on the page. As a final touch, you can age the lace. You could pre-stain the lace by dyeing it with tea or coffee before you sew it, but it's sometimes easier just to stain it using an ink pad and applicator. The edges of the pages can also be embellished by sewing a few hand stitches along the edge using some thick embroidery thread. To tie off at the end, loop the thread around the needle as if you were going to make a knot, but don't pull it tightly. Then insert the needle point through the loop and back into the last hole. Then carefully pull the thread tight. Tying it off this way, the thread should run down the needle shaft and form a knot at the very base of the needle point. You can embellish this further by leaving a long thread tail and tying on a large bead or a charm so that it dangles down the outside of the pages. Once the bead is threaded on, tie a knot at the end so it doesn't fall off. You can also add a similar sewn edge using a small fabric scrap. The fabric adds some additional visual texture and interest. Fold a small fabric strip over the edge of the page and make a few simple stitches along the length. Tabs made from fabric scraps can be added along the edges of the pages. I like to dress them up a bit with some stitches, and I also like to use some tearaway stabilizer underneath to make them stiff. Fabric and lace scraps can also be used to embellish and make pockets and tuck spots. Fabric and lace pockets could be sewn directly onto the page, but it's a bit awkward to do this. So the easiest way is to first sew them to a piece of tearaway stabilizer and then glue them onto the page. I sewed the fabric strips on my sewing machine using a zigzag stitch, and I tied off the thread tails at the front to add more visual texture. I've left a narrow strip of stabilizer down each side that will make it easy to glue the pocket to the page. You could use a glue stick to glue the pocket, but I really want this pocket to well and truly stick to the page, so I'm going to use some double-sided adhesive tape to attach it. For a final touch, I'm going to stain the lace using my ink pad. Pockets can, of course, also be made from paper or cardstock, such as scrapbook paper or paper scraps, or even your leftover book pages. Once you've cut or folded the pocket, you can add some machine or hand stitching around the edge before gluing it onto the page. I've machine stitched around the edges of this pocket using a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to sew on some fabric scraps and then glue on some words to make a small collage. You can also use the same method to make a double corner pocket, with one pocket slightly smaller than the other layered on top. As well as corner pockets, you can make square and rectangular pockets in a similar way. You can combine shapes to create unusual pockets. Tuck spots can be made using small bits of embellished paper, cardstock or fabric that are glued to the page or attached by paper clips. A simple flag can be made from a strip of leftover cardstock, folded in half and then attached to the page with a paper clip. I like to dress up my paperclip tuck spots by sewing on a couple of fabric scraps and leaving space to slip the paperclip underneath. Paperclips can also be dressed up a bit by tying on some ribbon at the top or a charm at the bottom. A paperclip tuck spot could also be made using small individual scraps of fabric glued to a piece of stabilizer, then layered and embellished with stitches or charms, then attached to the page, one on each side, with a paperclip. Paperclips can easily be hidden if you're thoughtful about the design. This tuck spot is made from a circular piece of paper with fabric scraps stitched on top, then folded in half and held in place with a paperclip. Journal cards and tags are fun and easy to make and embellish with bits of fabric and lace. To make a basic journal card, cut a piece of paper or cardstock to size. When using paper, it's best to use two pieces glued together to make the card a bit stiffer and more usable than when using just one thin sheet of paper. So I've cut a piece of scrapbook paper 3 inches wide by 8 inches long. Once the card is made, you can add simple fabric or lace trim down one side or across the bottom. Tags can be made in the same way as journal cards. Then snip the corners at 45-degree angle and punch a hole at the top. As well as blank journal cards, which are handy to have on hand for writing or notes, I also like to embellish my journal cards and tags with small collages using words, images and fabric scraps. You can also add tuck spots to journal cards and tags by gluing or sewing a little pocket to the bottom. You can make quick and easy photo frames by cutting slits into a journal card or tag and then inserting the photo, or sewing the photo directly onto the card. I like to save my favourite quotations by printing them onto paper and attaching them to a card with a few hand stitches. When making your journal, take your time and enjoy the process. This project is meant to be fun and creative, so always be thinking of ways that you can make your journal unique and personal. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also visit my website where you'll find free tutorials and printables for creative journaling.